The dust swirled like a living thing across the parched Montana landscape, as Bethany Vance clung desperately to her horse's mane, each labored breath bringing a fresh wave of agony through her wounded side. The bullet had torn through her 2 days prior. An infection had set in with a vengeance, turning her once steady hands to trembling leaves and her sharp mind to fever-addled confusion. Through blurred vision, she saw the silhouette of buildings rising from the haze ahead. Hawthorne, the frontier town she'd been struggling to reach since fleeing the ambush that had left her bleeding and alone. It was 1878, and the West was still wild, especially for a woman traveling alone. Bethany had known the risks when she'd set out from Chicago 3 weeks ago, but desperation had a way of making dangerous choices seem necessary. Her late father's cryptic letter had promised answers in Hawthorne, and answers were the one thing Bethany needed more than anything else in the world. Her horse stumbled, and pain exploded through her body as she fought to stay mounted. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding hours ago, but the heat radiating from it told her all she needed to know. If she didn't find help soon, she wouldn't live to discover why her father had summoned her to this remote corner of the Montana Territory with his final words. The main street of Hawthorne materialized before her, the midday sun casting harsh shadows across weathered buildings. Her vision tunneled, darkening at the edges as her horse came to a stop outside what appeared to be a general store. Voices reached her as if from underwater, distorted and echoing strangely in her ears. "Good Lord, she's about to fall. Someone get Doc Miller." Strong hands caught her as she slipped sideways from the saddle. The last thing Bethany saw before consciousness fled was a pair of concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a dusty cowboy hat. When she awoke, it was to the unfamiliar sensation of a real bed beneath her and clean linen against her skin. The pain in her side had dulled to a persistent throb, and the fever still burned through her veins, but the immediate danger of death seemed to have receded. A cool cloth pressed against her forehead, and those same blue eyes came into focus. "There you are," said a deep voice tinged with relief. "Was starting to wonder if you'd decided to sleep straight through to next Sunday." Bethany tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper, and her tongue too heavy to form words. Panic flashed through her as she realized her vulnerability alone in a strange place with a strange man. The man seemed to sense her distress and raised his hands in a placating gesture. "You're safe, miss. I'm Finn Valens, ranch foreman at the Triple Creek. Doc Miller patched you up good as new well, close enough anyway. That bullet did a fair bit of damage, but you're tough as old leather from the looks of it." She wanted to ask questions: where exactly she was, how long she'd been unconscious, if anyone was looking for her, but the effort of trying to speak sent her into a coughing fit that ignited fresh agony in her side. "Whoa there," Finn said, quickly helping her take a sip of water from a tin cup. She was too weak to speak, so the cowboy said, "Then just rest. I'll talk enough for us both." His smile was gentle, the kind that reached his eyes and created small creases at the corners. "Always been accused of running my mouth too much anyway. Might as well put it to good use," and talk he did. As Bethany drifted in and out of consciousness over the next several hours, Finn's voice became her anchor to reality. He told her she was in a room above the general store, that the town doctor had removed the bullet and cleaned the wound, and that she'd been unconscious for nearly a full day. "Doc says the fever should break by tomorrow if we're lucky," Finn explained, wringing out a fresh cloth and placing it on her forehead. "Infection's the real danger now, but he left some medicine that seems to be helping." When darkness fell outside the window, Finn lit a lantern and continued his one-sided conversation. He spoke of Hawthorne, a town that had sprung up around a silver mining operation 10 years earlier, and now served as a hub for the surrounding ranches. He mentioned the Triple Creek Ranch where he worked, describing the sprawling property with obvious pride. 15,000 acres of the prettiest land God ever made, he said. Got about 800 head of cattle and some of the finest quarter horses this side of the Mississippi. Owner's a decent fellow named Harrison Whitfield, fair with his men and honest in his dealings. Between bouts of fever-induced sleep, Bethany learned that Finn had come to Montana 5 years ago after the war, seeking a fresh start away from the bitter memories of Tennessee. He'd worked his way up from ranch hand to foreman through hard work and a natural way with horses and men alike. Never thought I'd settle in one place, he admitted during the small hours of the night when the town outside had gone silent. Always figured I'd keep moving, see everything there was to see, but there's something about this country that gets in your blood. By morning, Bethany's fever had indeed broken, leaving her weak but lucid. When she finally found her voice, it emerged as a raspy whisper. "Thank you," she managed, startling Finn, who had been dozing in a chair beside her bed. He straightened immediately, relief washing over his features. "Well, now she speaks. Was beginning to think I'd have to keep up this conversation all by myself for another day. How long?" She couldn't finish the question before coughing took hold again. 3 days since you rode into town looking like death warmed over, Finn replied, helping her sip from a cup of broth. Doc Miller's been by each morning and evening. Says you're healing well considering. My things. Safe and sound. Your saddlebags are right there, he pointed to the corner where her meager possessions had been stacked neatly. Horses at the livery getting treated like royalty. That's a fine animal you've got. Bethany nodded weakly. Shadow, he was my father's. The mention of her father brought reality crashing back, and she struggled to sit up. I need to, whoa now, Finn said, gently but firmly pressing her back against the pillows. The only thing you need to do is rest. Whatever business brought you to Hawthorne can wait until you're strong enough to stand without keeling over. She wanted to argue but lacked the strength. Instead, she asked, why are you helping me? You don't know me. Finn's expression turned thoughtful. My ma raised me to believe that how we treat strangers tells more about our character than how we treat friends. He shrugged. Besides, couldn't very well leave a wounded woman to fend for herself, could I? For the first time, Bethany took a proper look at her caretaker. Finn Valens appeared to be in his early 30s, with sun-bronzed skin and laugh lines around eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair was a touch too long, curling slightly at the nape of his neck, and a neatly trimmed beard covered a strong jaw. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his face, an openness and sincerity that felt increasingly rare in Bethany's experience. I'm Bethany Vance, she offered, realizing she hadn't properly introduced herself. Pleasure to meet you officially, Miss Vance, Finn replied with a smile. Though I confess, I've been calling you Sleeping Beauty in my head for the past few days. Despite everything, Bethany found herself smiling back. Hardly that. Begging to differ would be ungentlemanly. So I'll just say I've seen my share of true beauty in this world's sunrises over the mountains, wild horses running free across the plains, and you fit right in with those sights. Bethany felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. Before she could formulate a response, the door opened to admit a small, balding man carrying a black bag. Ah, our patient is awake, the newcomer said cheerfully. Excellent progress, Miss Vance. I'm Dr. Miller. The examination that followed was thorough but mercifully brief. The doctor pronounced himself satisfied with her recovery thus far, but insisted on at least another week of bed rest before she attempted any strenuous activity. "That bullet came dangerously close to your liver," Dr. Miller explained as he rebandaged her wound. "You're lucky Mr. Valens brought you to me when he did. Another few hours." He let the implication hang in the air. After the doctor left, promising to return the following day, Bethany turned to Finn with renewed curiosity. "You carried me here," he nodded, suddenly looking embarrassed. "You fell right off your horse at my feet. Seemed the thing to do. And you've been here the whole time. Don't you have responsibilities at your ranch?" Mr. Whitfield was understanding when I explained the situation. "Sent one of the boys into town with some of my things so I could stay nearby until you were out of danger." Finn cleared his throat. "I'll need to head back soon for a day or two now that you're improving. But Mrs. Holbrook, she owns this boarding house with her husband, has promised to look in on you." The thought of Finn leaving sent an unexpected pang through Bethany's chest. In just a few days, his steady presence had become a comfort in this strange place. But she had no claim on his time, and she'd already imposed enough. "You've done more than enough," she assured him. "I can manage from here." Finn studied her face for a moment. "You know, for someone who nearly died, you sure are eager to be rid of me." His tone was light, but there was a question in his eyes. Bethany sighed. "It's not that. I'm grateful more than I can say, but I came to Hawthorne for a reason and I need to." She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Need to what?" Finn prompted gently. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something in his open, trustworthy face, but Bethany found herself explaining. "My father died 3 months ago in Chicago. Among his effects was a letter addressed to me, sealed with instructions that it only be opened after his death." She paused, gathering strength. "The letter mentioned a property here in Hawthorne, a claim he'd filed years ago but never told me about. There was a deed and a map." Finn's expression showed genuine interest. "What kind of claim?" "Mining, I believe." "The letter wasn't specific, only that there was something valuable there that rightfully belonged to me, and that I should come claim it before." She hesitated again. "Before what?" "Before someone named Maxwell Thornton discovered it was mine. My father wrote that this man was dangerous and would stop at nothing to take what belonged to our family." Bethany closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't know what to make of it. My father was a shopkeeper, not a miner. He never mentioned Montana or any mining interests." Finn whistled low. "Maxwell Thornton, you say? That's a name folks around here know well. Owns the biggest silver mine in the territory and half the businesses in Hawthorne to boot." A chill ran down Bethany's spine. "You know him?" "Know of him," Finn corrected. "Our paths don't often cross." Ranchers and mining men tend to keep to different circles. But his reputation precedes him. Shrewd businessman, ruthless with competitors. Word is he's been buying up every mining claim he can get his hands on for miles around. This was precisely what Bethany had feared. "Then he's exactly the kind of man my father warned me about." Finn leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "What exactly happened to you before you rode into town? That wasn't just any wound someone shot you." Bethany's hand instinctively went to her bandaged side. "I was camped for the night about 20 miles outside of town. 2 men approached my fire, claiming to be lost travelers. Something about them felt wrong, but I couldn't turn them away without appearing suspicious." She swallowed hard at the memory. "They asked a lot of questions: where I was headed, why I was traveling alone. I was careful with my answers, but they kept pressing." Finn's expression had darkened. "And then, one of them mentioned seeing my map when I wasn't looking. Said a lady like me had no business with mining claims. When I tried to leave, he grabbed me. We struggled and his gun went off." Her voice had grown steady as she recounted the terrifying encounter. I managed to get to Shadow and rode hard through the night. I think I lost them, but I don't know for sure. Did you recognize either man? Or did they give names? Bethany shook her head. Nothing I could connect to anyone. But the shorter one, the one who shot me, he wore a distinctive ring with a black stone. Finn's jaw tightened. That sounds like Garrett Walsh. He's Thornton's right-hand man. Does the dirty work Thornton wants to keep his hands clean of? The confirmation of her suspicions sent ice through Bethany's veins. Then Thornton already knows I'm here, and what I've come for. Seems that way. Finn stood and paced the small room, but he doesn't know where you are now. Far as anyone in town's concerned, you're just an unfortunate traveler who ran into trouble on the trail. Doc Miller's discreet, and so am I. Bethany appreciated his reassurance but couldn't shake her fear. Once I'm well enough to start asking questions about my father's claim, Thornton will know. Finn stopped pacing and turned to her with sudden resolve. Then we don't ask questions, at least not the obvious ones. I know people in Hawthorne, good people who don't care for Thornton's ways. We can make quiet inquiries without drawing attention. Bethany asked, surprised by his offer. Unless you'd prefer to face a ruthless mining baron and his gunmen alone. Finn raised an eyebrow. Because I've got to tell you, Miss Vance, you don't strike me as the type who carries a six-shooter under those skirts. Despite the gravity of the situation, Bethany found herself laughing, then wincing as the movement pulled at her wound. I'm afraid my skills lie more in bookkeeping than gunslinging, Mr. Valens. Finn, he corrected. If we're going to be partners in this venture, we might as well use our given names. Partners. The word felt strangely intimate. He smiled that disarming smile again. Just until we sort out your claim and get Thornton off your back. I'm between adventures at the moment anyway. Bethany knew she should decline his offer. She'd come to Montana prepared to handle her father's mysterious legacy alone, and involving this man, this stranger who'd already done so much in what could be a dangerous situation, seemed unfair. But the memory of those men at her campfire and the knowledge that Thornton was actively searching for her made Finn's offer of help too valuable to refuse. Thank you, Finn, she said finally, but I can't ask you to risk yourself for my troubles. You didn't ask, I offered. His tone brooked no argument. Besides, any man who'd send hired guns after a woman traveling alone deserves to be taken down a peg or two. Consider it my civic duty. For the first time since arriving in Hawthorne, Bethany felt something like hope. Perhaps with Finn's help, she could uncover whatever secret her father had hidden in this remote mining town without ending up dead in the process. As if reading her thoughts, Finn added softly, "Get some rest now. Tomorrow we can start making plans." Exhaustion washed over Bethany in a sudden wave, and she found herself struggling to keep her eyes open. "Will you stay? Just until I fall asleep?" Finn settled back into the chair beside her bed. "I'm not going anywhere." As sleep claimed her, Bethany was vaguely aware of Finn resuming his quiet narrative, telling her about the first time he'd seen the mountains of Montana rising before him like sentinels against the sky. His voice, steady and reassuring, followed her into dreams that, for once, weren't haunted by the echo of gunfire and the memory of running for her life. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through the curtains and the mouth-watering scent of fresh bread. Bethany awoke to find an older woman with silver-streaked hair arranging a tray of food on the small table. "Ah, you're awake. Wonderful timing," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Eliza Holbrook. My husband Thomas and I own this establishment. Mr. Valens asked me to look in on you while he's attending to some business." Bethany struggled to sit up, gratefully accepting Mrs. Holbrook's help with the pillows. "It's kind of you to trouble yourself." "No trouble at all, dear. It's nice having another woman to fuss over. Our regular boarders are all men miners and cowboys mostly, and they're not much for conversation beyond complaints about the food. She chuckled, placing the tray across Bethany's lap. Fresh bread, some butter and beef stew. Doctor's orders are to build your strength. The food smelled heavenly, and Bethany realized she was ravenous. As she ate, Mrs. Holbrook tidied the small room, keeping up a steady stream of cheerful chatter about Hawthorne and its residents. Bethany listened carefully, hoping to glean useful information without asking direct questions. And of course, everyone's talking about the new opera house Mr. Thornton is building, Mrs. Holbrook was saying. Thomas says it's just a way for him to show off his wealth, but I think it'll be lovely to have some culture in town. They say it'll be finished by Christmas. Mr. Thornton seems to have quite an influence here, Bethany observed casually. Mrs. Holbrook's expression turned guarded. Oh yes, he owns half the town these days. Came here 10 years ago with nothing but determination and a knack for finding silver where others found only dirt. Some say he's had more than his share of luck, and others, Bethany prompted. The older woman lowered her voice, though they were alone in the room. Others say luck had less to do with it than sharp practice. There have been stories. She stopped herself, shaking her head. But listen to me gossiping like an old biddy. Pay me no mind, dear. Mr. Thornton employs many people in this town, and that's a fact no one can dispute. Before Bethany could press further, there was a knock at the door, and Finn entered carrying a bundle of clothing. Good morning, ladies, he greeted them cheerfully. Mrs. Holbrook, I see you've been taking good care of our patient. She's a model patient, Mrs. Holbrook replied with a smile. Far better than you were last winter when that bronco threw you and cracked 3 of your ribs. Finn winced dramatically. I maintain that the real injury was to my pride, madam. Mrs. Holbrook laughed, patted Bethany's hand, and excused herself to tend to her other duties, leaving them alone. You look better today, Finn said, placing the bundle on the foot of the bed. More color in your cheeks. I feel better, Bethany admitted, though I suspect it will be some time before I'm fully recovered. Doc Miller says you're healing nicely, but he's still insisting on at least another week of rest before you even think about riding again. Finn gestured to the bundle he'd brought. I took the liberty of asking Mrs. Holbrook to find you some fresh clothing. Your own things were, well, there was a lot of blood. Bethany hadn't even considered the state of her clothing. That was thoughtful, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Fashion choices in Hawthorne are somewhat limited. He unfolded the bundle to reveal a simple blue calico dress, a shirtwaist, and some other necessities. Mrs. Holbrook assures me these will fit well enough, and she's happy to make any alterations needed. The clothes were plain but practical, exactly what Bethany would need once she was well enough to begin her search for her father's claim. They're perfect. Finn seemed pleased by her response. I've also been making those quiet inquiries we discussed. Found the county clerk who keeps the mining claim records. Bethany's pulse quickened. And? He's an old-timer named Sullivan who's been running the office since before Hawthorne was much more than a few tents beside a creek. Says he remembers every claim he's ever recorded. Finn lowered his voice. More importantly, he's no friend to Thornton. Had a brother who lost his claim in a dispute with Thornton years back, died in a mine collapse the following year. So he might be willing to help us. I believe so, but we need to be careful. Thornton has eyes and ears all over town. Finn settled into the chair beside her bed. I told Sullivan I was interested in old claims that might be available for purchase. Said I had a friend back east looking to invest in silver. He seemed willing to show me the records once I buy him a few drinks at Donovan's saloon. Bethany nodded slowly, impressed by Finn's approach. When? Tonight. I thought it best to move quickly, especially if Thornton's men are looking for you." He studied her face. "While I'm doing that, I need you to stay put and rest. Mrs. Holbrook will check on you regularly, and I've asked the doctor to stop by this evening." Though frustrated by her own helplessness, Bethany knew he was right. In her weakened state, she was more liability than asset. "Be careful. If Sullivan mentions anything about my father, Jonathan Vance, or a claim in that name, I'll be the soul of discretion," Finn promised. "Just fishing for information, nothing more." They spent the remainder of the day planning. Finn brought a map of the area surrounding Hawthorne, and Bethany compared it to the crude map her father had included with his letter. The location marked on her father's map appeared to be about 15 miles northwest of town, in a rocky area known locally as Devil's Backbone. "Not prime silver country," Finn observed, studying the terrain. "Most of the productive mines are south and east of town. Wonder what your father found up there that was worth claiming." Bethany shook her head. "I wish I knew. His letter only said it was valuable and rightfully belonged to our family." As evening approached, Finn prepared to leave for his meeting with Sullivan. He changed into cleaner clothes and trimmed his beard, looking more the respectable rancher than the rugged cowboy who'd first caught Bethany as she fell from her horse. "How do I look?" he asked with a self-deprecating smile. Trustworthy enough for a county clerk to share confidential information. In truth, he looked handsome enough to make Bethany's heart skip a beat, but she merely nodded. "Very official. Just be careful not to overplay your hand." "I'll be back before midnight," he promised, donning his hat. "Keep the door locked, and don't answer to anyone but Mrs. Holbrook or Doc Miller." After he left, Bethany found herself restless despite her body's need for rest. She managed to get out of bed long enough to stand at the window, looking down on Hawthorne's Main Street as twilight descended. The town was coming alive with evening activity, miners fresh from their shifts, cowboys from nearby ranches, and townspeople going about their business. Directly across the street stood an imposing brick building with a sign proclaiming it the offices of the Thornton Mining Company. Even as Bethany watched, a well-dressed man emerged, pausing to lock the door behind him. Something in his bearing, the confident set of his shoulders, the way others on the street stepped aside as he passed, told her this must be Maxwell Thornton himself. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 40, with dark hair graying at the temples and a meticulously groomed mustache. There was nothing overtly threatening in his appearance, yet Bethany felt a chill run through her as he glanced up toward her window. Though she stepped back quickly, she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow he knew she was there and knew exactly who she was. Hours later, Bethany was startled from a light doze by a soft knock at her door. She tensed, remembering Finn's warning, but relaxed when she heard Mrs. Holbrook's voice calling her name. "Come in," she answered, reaching to light the lamp beside her bed. Mrs. Holbrook entered with another tray of food and a troubled expression. "I thought you might like some supper, dear. It's getting late." "Thank you," Bethany said, noting the older woman's distress. "Is something wrong?" Mrs. Holbrook hesitated, then sighed heavily. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but I believe you have a right to know. There were men asking after you in town today, describing a young woman of your age and appearance, wanting to know if anyone matching that description had arrived in Hawthorne recently." Bethany's blood ran cold. "Did they say why they were looking for this woman?" "Said she was the daughter of an old friend, and they had important business with her." Mrs. Holbrook's eyes were sharp with suspicion. "I've lived in Hawthorne long enough to know trouble when I see it. These weren't men looking to reunite with a friend's daughter. Did anyone tell them about me?" "Not that I know of. Doc Miller's kept quiet about treating you, and my Thomas wouldn't say a word. But Hawthorne's a small town, Miss Vance. Secrets don't stay secret for long. Bethany closed her eyes briefly, trying to think. Did these men work for Maxwell Thornton, Mrs. Holbrook looked startled. I couldn't say for certain, but one of them, the shorter one with the scar across his cheek, I've seen him with Thornton's foreman before. That would be Garrett Walsh, the man Finn had mentioned, likely the same man who had shot her. They were getting closer. Mrs. Holbrook, I need to find Finn, Mr. Valens. He should know about this. The older woman nodded. He's still at Donovan's with old Sullivan, last I heard. But you're in no condition to go looking for him, and I can't leave the boarding house unattended with all my lodgers coming back for the night. Bethany tried to push herself up from the bed, determined despite her weakness. I have to warn him. If these men connect him to me, he could be in danger too. Mrs. Holbrook gently but firmly pressed her back against the pillows. You'll tear your stitches, and then where will you be? I'll send Thomas to fetch Mr. Valens. He can be discreet. Reluctantly, Bethany agreed, recognizing the wisdom in the older woman's words. Mrs. Holbrook hurried off to find her husband, leaving Bethany to wait in anxious silence, every creak of the boarding house's old timbers making her start with alarm. When the door finally opened again nearly an hour later, it was Finn who entered, his expression grim. Mrs. Holbrook told me about our visitors, he said without preamble, locking the door behind him. Walsh and his partner have been asking all over town. It's only a matter of time before someone puts together that the wounded woman who rode in 3 days ago might be the one they're seeking. Did you learn anything from Sullivan? Bethany asked, noting the heightened tension in Finn's bearing. He nodded, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. Your father did indeed file a claim in the Devil's Backbone area, but it wasn't for silver. Then what? Gold. The word hung in the air between them. Sullivan says Jonathan Vance came to Hawthorne in '68, filed a claim on a small creek running through the Backbone, worked it for about 6 months, then suddenly disappeared. The claim still in his name, still valid. Bethany struggled to reconcile this information with what she knew of her father. That makes no sense. My father was in Chicago in 1868. I was 12 years old. I would have remembered if he'd gone away for 6 months. Finn shrugged. Sullivan was quite certain about the name and the date. Said your father struck it rich just before he left, came into town with a pouch of gold dust worth more than most men see in a lifetime. Paid his bills, settled his accounts, and vanished. And the claim, if it was producing gold, why abandon it? That's where the story gets interesting. Finn pulled the chair closer to her bed and lowered his voice, though they were alone. According to Sullivan, Thornton tried to buy the claim immediately after your father left, offered a small fortune for it. When he couldn't locate Jonathan Vance, he tried to have the claim declared abandoned so he could file on it himself. Bethany felt a piece of the puzzle click into place. But he couldn't, because my father kept the claim active somehow. Exactly. Sullivan says your father sent money each year through a lawyer in Helena to pay the renewal fees. Thornton was furious, apparently even sent men to work the claim illegally, thinking Vance would never return to stop him. And did they find gold? Finn's expression was puzzled. That's the strangest part. They found nothing, not a speck. The creek had seemingly played out completely. After a few months, Thornton gave up and moved on to other ventures. But he's kept an eye on that claim for 10 years, making sure he'd be the first to know if it ever came available. Or if my father's heir came to claim it, Bethany added softly, which is exactly what's happened. Finn stood and began to pace the small room. We need to get you out of Hawthorne tonight if possible. Once Walsh connects you to your father, your life won't be worth a plugged nickel. Fear gripped Bethany, but she forced it down. And go where? I came to claim what's mine, not run away from it. What good is a gold mine, even one as rich as Sullivan described, if you're dead? Finn's voice was urgent. We can go to the Triple Creek. It's defensible, and Mr. Whitfield would never turn away someone in need. Once you're fully recovered, we can figure out how to approach the claim safely. The logic of his plan was undeniable, but something about retreating didn't sit right with Bethany. And what about Thornton? He'll still be looking for me. Let him look. The ranch is 20 miles from town and my men are loyal. You'll be safe there until we can come up with a better plan. Bethany realized she had little choice. In her weakened state, she was vulnerable, and staying in town was growing more dangerous by the hour. When do we leave? As soon as you're strong enough to sit a horse tomorrow at first light if possible. I'll make the arrangements. Finn paused, his expression softening. I know this isn't what you planned, Bethany, but I give you my word. I'll help you claim what's rightfully yours. We just need to be smart about it. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to doubt. In the few days she'd known him, Finn Valens had proven himself to be a man of his word, someone who, for reasons she still didn't fully understand, had committed himself to her cause as if it were his own. I trust you, she said simply, and was rewarded with a smile that transformed his entire face. That might be the nicest thing anyone said to me in years, he replied. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without you falling off your horse from exhaustion. As Finn made preparations for their departure, sending messages to the ranch and arranging for their horses, Bethany found herself thinking about the strange tale Sullivan had told. Her father, the quiet, methodical shopkeeper she'd known all her life, had apparently lived a secret life as a gold prospector in Montana. He'd found a fortune, abandoned it, and spent 10 years paying to keep the claim active, all without ever mentioning it to his only daughter. What other secrets had Jonathan Vance carried to his grave? And more importantly, what was waiting for her at Devil's Backbone that was worth killing for after all these years? The answers, she suspected, would be more valuable than gold and potentially far more dangerous. Dawn was just breaking over the eastern mountains when Finn helped Bethany mount Shadow outside the boarding house. Despite a night of fitful sleep interrupted by pain and worry, she felt stronger than she had in days. Doc Miller had visited early, changing her bandages and providing additional medicines for the journey, though he'd made his disapproval of her leaving clear. At least the bleeding has stopped entirely, he'd grumbled as he packed his bag. But that wound could reopen with too much exertion. Take it slow, and change the dressing twice daily with the salve I've provided. Mrs. Holbrook had been equally concerned but practical, providing them with food for the journey and extra clothing for Bethany. My Thomas will keep an ear out for any more talk about you in town, she'd promised. If those men start asking more pointed questions, he'll send word to the Triple Creek. Now, as they prepared to depart, Bethany felt a curious mixture of gratitude and apprehension. These people had taken her in, cared for her, and were now helping her escape potential danger, all without knowing the full truth of her situation. Ready? Finn asked, adjusting Shadow's saddle to ensure her comfort. Bethany nodded, gathering the reins in hands that trembled only slightly. As I'll ever be. Finn mounted his own horse, a powerful chestnut gelding, and led them out of town via back streets to avoid the main thoroughfare where they might be seen. The sun was just cresting the horizon as they reached the open country beyond Hawthorne's outskirts, casting long shadows across the sage-dotted landscape. 20 miles to the ranch, Finn explained as they settled into a gentle pace. We'll take it slow, stop often to rest. No sense rushing and aggravating your injury. Bethany appreciated his consideration but couldn't help glancing over her shoulder. What if Walsh follows us? Let him try. Finn patted the rifle secured in a scabbard beneath his leg, but I doubt he will, at least not immediately. He's still looking for a woman traveling alone, not one accompanied by a ranch foreman heading home after a trip to town. The logic was sound, and Bethany felt her tension ease slightly as they rode. The morning was beautiful, with a clear sky promising fair weather and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant pine. Under different circumstances, she might have enjoyed the ride and Finn's companionable presence beside her. "Tell me about yourself," Finn said after they'd ridden in silence for some time. "All I know is that you're from Chicago. Your father was apparently a secret gold prospector, and you're brave enough to travel alone across half the country with a mysterious map." The invitation to share her story was gently delivered, with no pressure behind it. Bethany found herself wanting to reciprocate the openness Finn had shown during her fevered first days in Hawthorne. "There's not much to tell," she began. "My mother died when I was very young. My father raised me alone, running a small dry goods store in Chicago. He made sure I was educated, insisted I learn bookkeeping and business management alongside more traditional feminine accomplishments. A progressive thinker," Finn observed. Bethany smiled at the memory. "He was, in his quiet way. Always said a woman should be able to stand on her own feet in this world. When he died, heart failure, very sudden, I discovered he'd left the store to me outright, not to some male relative as most men would have done. You must have been close." "We were, which makes all of this so bewildering. How could he have kept such a significant part of his life secret from me?" The question had haunted her since Finn's conversation with Sullivan. "A gold mine, Finn. A fortune he walked away from without a word." Finn considered this. "People have reasons for the choices they make, not always reasons others would understand. Perhaps he intended to tell you when the time was right, and instead left me a cryptic letter and a map after his death," Bethany concluded with a hint of bitterness. "Along with the attention of a dangerous man who's apparently been coveting our claim for a decade." They paused to rest the horses near a small stream around midday. Finn helped Bethany dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist, then spread a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. The movement of riding had aggravated her wound, and Bethany was grateful for the respite. "We're making good time," Finn assured her as they shared the food Mrs. Holbrook had packed. "Should reach the ranch by late afternoon at this pace." Bethany picked at her bread and cheese, her mind still churning with questions about her father and the mysterious claim. "What do you think we'll find at Devil's Backbone, if Thornton's men found no gold when they worked the claim illegally?" Finn stretched his long legs out before him, leaning back against the trunk of the tree. "Hard to say. Gold can be tricky. A creek might seem played out, then reveal new deposits after a good rain changes the stream bed. Or your father might have found the mother lode and covered it up before he left, intending to return when it was safe." "Safe from what? Or whom?" Bethany wondered aloud. "That's the question, isn't it?" Finn's blue eyes studied her face. "Whatever your father found there, gold or something else, he clearly believed it was worth protecting. And Thornton clearly believes it's worth killing for." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Bethany, despite the warm afternoon sun. Before she could respond, Finn suddenly tensed, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Someone's coming," he said quietly, rising to his feet in one fluid motion. "Stay here." Bethany held her breath as Finn moved toward the horses, positioning himself between her and the approaching rider, visible now as a dust cloud in the distance. As the rider drew nearer, Finn's posture relaxed slightly. "It's all right," he called back to her. "It's just Caleb, one of my ranch hands." The rider, a young man barely out of his teens, galloped up to them, reining his lathered horse to a stop. "Mr. Valens, been looking for you since dawn," he gasped, clearly having ridden hard. "Mr. Whitfield sent me, said it couldn't wait." Finn's expression grew serious. "What's happened, Caleb? Men came to the ranch yesterday evening, 3 of them, asking for you by name. Wanted to know if you'd been in town recently, if you'd helped a woman who was hurt." The young cowboy glanced curiously at Bethany. "Mr. Whitfield didn't like the look of them, so he said you'd been gone for 2 weeks on a cattle drive to Helena." Bethany's heart sank. Walsh had made the connection faster than they'd anticipated. "Did they believe him?" Finn asked sharply. Caleb shook his head. "Don't think so. One of them, mean-looking fellow with a scar, said they'd wait for you to return. Mr. Whitfield sent them packing with a shotgun after they started threatening the other hands, but he's worried they might come back with more men." Finn cursed under his breath, turning to Bethany with a grim expression. "We can't go to the ranch if Walsh has men watching the road." "Where can we go?" Bethany asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Back to Hawthorne." "No, that's the first place they'll look when they realize we're not at Triple Creek." Finn was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There's a line cabin about 10 miles north of here, belongs to the ranch, but isn't used much except during spring roundup. It's isolated, hard to find if you don't know where to look." "Won't they search all the ranch property?" Bethany asked. "Eventually, maybe. But the Triple Creek covers thousands of acres with dozens of lined shacks and old homesteads scattered across it. It would take them weeks to search it all." Finn turned to Caleb. "Ride back to Mr. Whitfield. Tell him what's happened and where we're headed. Ask him to send supplies when it's safe, food, ammunition, medicine." The young cowboy nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. Anything else?" "Tell him to keep his eyes and ears open for any word about Jonathan Vance's gold claim, and warn Mrs. Holbrook at the boarding house that Walsh is casting a wider net now." Finn clasped the young man's shoulder. "Be careful, Caleb. These men are dangerous." As Caleb galloped away, Bethany struggled to her feet, wincing at the pain in her side. "This is my fight, Finn. You shouldn't have to hide on your own property because of me." Finn helped her back to shadow, his touch gentle but his expression determined. "I made my choice the moment I caught you falling from this horse, Bethany. I'm not abandoning you now." There was something in his voice, a warmth that went beyond mere duty or obligation that made Bethany's heart beat faster. She allowed him to help her mount, trying to ignore both the pain in her side and the strange fluttering in her chest whenever his hand steadied her. They altered their course, heading northeast toward rougher country where the prairie began to give way to foothills. The pace was necessarily slower now, with Finn constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. By late afternoon, Bethany was fighting exhaustion, the persistent ache in her side having blossomed into sharp, stabbing pain with each step of her horse. "Not much further," Finn assured her, noting her pallor with concern. "See that line of cottonwoods along the creek? The cabin's just beyond them, tucked against that rise." Bethany nodded, lacking the strength for more. When they finally reached the small log structure nestled in a grove of aspens, it was all she could do to remain upright in the saddle while Finn dismounted and checked the cabin. "It's clear," he called, returning to help her down. "Not much to look at, but it's solid and defensible." The cabin was indeed rustic, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against one wall. A small window overlooked the creek, and the door was sturdy oak that could be barred from within. Simple as it was, to Bethany it looked like salvation. Finn helped her to the cot, then busied himself unloading their supplies and tending to the horses. By the time he returned, Bethany was struggling to remove her riding jacket, her movements hampered by pain and fatigue. "Here, let me help," he offered, kneeling beside the cot. His fingers were surprisingly deft as he helped her out of the jacket, careful not to jostle her injury. In the process, his hand brushed against hers, and Bethany was startled by the jolt of awareness that shot through her at the brief contact. "We should check your wound," Finn said, seemingly unaffected by their proximity. Doc Miller said to change the dressing twice daily. Bethany nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I can manage." Finn stood, respecting her privacy. "Of course. I'll get a fire going and see what I can put together for supper. There should be some basic supplies here: beans, coffee, maybe some salt pork." While Finn busied himself at the fireplace, Bethany carefully removed the outer layer of her clothing and examined her bandages. There was no fresh blood, which she took as a good sign, but the area around the wound was hot and tender to the touch. Using the medical supplies Doc Miller had provided, she cleaned and rebandaged the injury as best she could, then donned the clean shirtwaist Mrs. Holbrook had packed for her. By the time she'd finished, Finn had a cheerful fire crackling in the hearth and water heating for coffee. The simple domestic scene struck Bethany with unexpected force. This man, who barely knew her, had turned his life upside down to protect her. He was now a fugitive on his own land, risking his livelihood and possibly his life for her cause. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked suddenly, the question escaping before she could consider it. Finn looked up from stirring a pot of beans, his expression surprised. "Doing what?" "This. All of it. Helping me when I rode into town half dead, investigating my father's claim, now hiding me from Thornton's men." Bethany shook her head in bewilderment. "You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Yet here you are, risking everything." Finn was quiet for a long moment, his attention seemingly focused on the pot before him. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "When I came to Montana after the war, I was lost, seen too much death, done things I wasn't proud of. Drifted for nearly 2 years, taking whatever work I could find, moving on when the memories got too close." He glanced up, meeting her eyes. "I was riding through the Gallatin Valley when my horse went lame miles from the nearest town. An old rancher named Thomas Whitfield found me walking alongside that sorry animal in a snowstorm, brought me to his home, gave me shelter and work when he had no reason to trust a stranger." Bethany listened, beginning to understand. "When I asked him why, he said something I've never forgotten. The measure of a man isn't what he does when it's easy, but what he does when it's hard and there's nothing in it for him." Finn smiled faintly. "I decided then that if I ever found someone in trouble, I'd do for them what Whitfield did for me. Pay forward the kindness that saved my life." It was the longest personal story Finn had shared, and Bethany sensed there was much more beneath the surface: pain and regret that had shaped the man before her. "That's a noble philosophy," she said softly. Finn shrugged, returning his attention to their supper. "Not nobility. Just trying to be the kind of man who deserves the second chance he got." They ate in companionable silence as twilight deepened outside the cabin's single window. After the meal, Finn insisted Bethany take the cot while he made a pallet near the fire. Despite her protestations that he'd already sacrificed enough, he was adamant. "I've slept on harder ground under worse conditions," he assured her. "And I'll need to keep the fire going through the night anyway. It gets cold up here, even in summer." As she settled onto the narrow cot, exhaustion overtaking her despite her concerns, Bethany watched Finn move about the cabin, securing the door and checking the window one last time before adding wood to the fire. There was something deeply comforting about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel safe despite the danger that had driven them to this isolated shelter. "Finn," she called softly as he prepared to settle on his makeshift bed. "Thank you. not just for the help, but for explaining. I understand better now. He looked over at her, his face half illuminated by the firelight. Get some rest, Bethany. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next move. But as Bethany drifted toward sleep, she couldn't help wondering if there might be more to Finn's dedication than a philosophical debt to a man who'd once shown him kindness. The way he sometimes looked at her, when he thought she wouldn't notice, suggested possibilities she wasn't yet ready to examine too closely. Morning came with golden light filtering through the cabin's small window, and the scent of coffee brewing on the hearth. Bethany awoke to find Finn already dressed and busy preparing a simple breakfast of Jonna cake and the last of their bacon. "How are you feeling?" he asked, noting her careful movements as she sat up. "Better," she replied, and it wasn't entirely a lie. While the wound still pained her, the night of uninterrupted rest had done wonders for her overall strength. "What's the plan for today?" Finn brought her coffee, the mug warming her hands as she took it gratefully. "First priority is getting a better sense of our situation. I'm going to ride out and scout the area, make sure Walsh and his men haven't tracked us here." Alarm flashed through Bethany. "Is that safe?" "Safer than sitting here blind," Finn replied pragmatically. "I know this country better than they do. I can move without being seen if I need to." Bethany couldn't argue with the logic, though the thought of being left alone made her uneasy. "How long will you be gone?" "A few hours at most. I want to check the main trails leading to this area and see if I can spot any sign of search parties." He hesitated, then added, "I'd also like to get closer to your father's claim, if possible, see what we're dealing with there." The reminder of their ultimate goal sent a jolt through Bethany. With the immediate danger of Walsh's pursuit, she'd almost forgotten the reason she'd come to Montana in the first place. "You think it's safe to approach the claim?" she asked. "Probably not directly," Finn admitted. "But I can get to a ridge overlooking Devil's Backbone, maybe get a better sense of the terrain. The more information we have, the better our chances of figuring out what your father found there and why Thornton wants it so badly." After breakfast, Finn prepared to leave, checking his rifle and pistol and filling canteens from the creek. Before mounting, he handed Bethany his revolver. "Just in case," he said quietly. "The cabin's well hidden, and I doubt anyone will come this way, but better safe than sorry." "Do you know how to use this?" Bethany took the weapon carefully. "My father taught me the basics. Said a woman living alone should know how to protect herself." Finn nodded approvingly. "Keep the door barred. If you hear riders approaching, don't panic. It could be Caleb bringing supplies from the ranch, but if you're not sure—" "I'll be careful," she promised. With a final nod, Finn swung into the saddle and rode away, quickly disappearing among the aspens. Bethany watched until the sound of hoofbeats faded, then returned to the cabin, barring the door as instructed. The hours of Finn's absence stretched interminably. Bethany busied herself as best she could cleaning the cabin, washing their few dishes in the creek, and finally sitting by the window with her father's letter, reading it for perhaps the 100th time. "My dearest Bethany, if you are reading this, I have passed beyond this world and can no longer protect you from the truth I've hidden these many years. Forgive me for the secrecy, but I believed it necessary for your safety. In the spring of 1868, I traveled to Montana Territory following rumors of gold in the mountains west of what is now Hawthorne. What I discovered there was beyond my wildest dreams, not just gold, but something far more valuable. Something that rightfully belongs to our family through your mother's lineage. I cannot commit the full details to paper, for fear this letter might fall into the wrong hands. Know only that I have maintained our claim to this discovery by paying the necessary fees each year through my attorney in Helena, Enclosed you will find a deed to the mining claim and a map showing its location. The claim is registered in my name at the county office in Hawthorne. Should anything happen to me, I urge you to travel there and secure what is rightfully yours before Maxwell Thornton discovers it belongs to you. This man is dangerous and will stop at nothing to take what belongs to our family. The key to understanding what you will find at Devil's Backbone lies with your mother's family Bible, which I have kept locked in my desk drawer all these years. The inscription on the flyleaf will guide you. I regret that I must burden you with this legacy, but I could not take this secret to my grave. What waits for you in Montana is your birthright, Bethany. Claim it with my blessing, but be vigilant. Trust no one until you are certain of their character. With eternal love, your father, Jonathan Vance. The letter raised more questions than it answered. What had her father found that was far more valuable than gold? What connection did it have to her mother's family? And what significance could a family Bible possibly hold to a mining claim in Montana? Bethany had brought the Bible with her. Of course, a small, leather-bound volume that had been her mother's only legacy. But the inscription on the flyleaf mentioned by her father had proven frustratingly cryptic. To Elizabeth on our wedding day, may this guide your path as surely as the North Star guides the traveler home. J.V. 1852. Nothing in those words had suggested any connection to gold mines or Montana territory. Yet her father had believed the inscription contained a key to understanding whatever he'd found at Devil's Backbone. Lost in these puzzling thoughts, Bethany was startled by the distant sound of hoofbeats. She quickly moved away from the window, retrieving Finn's revolver from beside the cot. The approaching rider was moving slowly, not with the urgency she would expect from someone fleeing pursuit. "Bethany," Finn's voice called from outside. "It's me." Relief flooded through her as she unbarred the door to admit him. One look at his face told her something had happened. "What is it?" she asked as he entered, removing his hat and running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "I made it to a ridge overlooking your father's claim," he said, accepting the water she offered. "There are men there, Bethany. At least 6 of them with equipment, picks, shovels, even some blasting powder. They're working the claim right now." Bethany felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "Thornton's men," Finn nodded grimly. "Has to be. They've set up a camp near the creek. Look like they're planning to stay a while. Whatever your father found, or whatever Thornton thinks he found, they're determined to get it before you can." The implications were clear. Not only had Thornton connected Bethany to the Vance claim, but he'd also decided to take decisive action, moving men onto the property illegally to extract whatever value it held before she could assert her rightful ownership. "But that's theft," Bethany said, anger overriding fear. "The claim belongs to me now. They have no right. Rights don't mean much out here when there's no one to enforce them," Finn interrupted gently. "The nearest law is in Hawthorne, and Sheriff Briggs owes his position to Thornton's influence. Even if we could get to him, I doubt he'd intervene." Bethany sank onto the cot, the weight of their situation settling on her shoulders. "So Thornton wins. He takes what my father protected for 10 years, and I lose my inheritance without ever knowing what it was." "I didn't say that." Finn's voice had taken on a steely quality she hadn't heard before. "I said the law won't help us. That doesn't mean we can't help ourselves." Bethany looked up at him, surprised by the determination in his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean we need more information. We need to understand exactly what your father found and why it's so valuable to Thornton." He sat beside her, his expression intense. "You mentioned a Bible, your mother's family Bible. Your father's letter said it contained some kind of key." "Yes, but I've examined it thoroughly." There's nothing that seems to connect to a gold mine in Montana. She retrieved the small volume from her saddlebag, handling it with care despite its worn condition. Just a sentimental inscription from my father to my mother on their wedding day. Finn took the Bible reverently, opening to the flyleaf where the inscription was written in faded ink. He read it aloud, brow furrowed in concentration. May this guide your path as surely as the North Star guides the traveler home. Interesting choice of words for a wedding gift. What do you mean? The North Star Polaris has been used by travelers for navigation for centuries. It's the one fixed point in the night sky, always indicating true north. Finn glanced up at her. Your father was telling your mother that this Bible would guide her, give her direction, just as the North Star guides travelers. Bethany had always assumed the words were merely romantic sentiment. But how does that help us understand what he found at the claim? Finn continued to study the inscription. Maybe it's not the words themselves, but something else in the Bible, something that would guide your path to whatever is hidden at Devil's Backbone. Together, they began a careful examination of the Bible, looking for any markings, annotations, or inserted papers that might provide a clue. They found nothing until Bethany turned to the book of Revelation and noticed a slight discoloration on one page. Wait, she said, holding the page up to the light from the window. There's something here. Barely visible, someone had underlined certain words in the text with the lightest touch of a pencil. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21, Finn noted. The New Jerusalem described as having walls of jasper, gates of pearl, and streets of gold. But what's the significance? Bethany studied the underlined passage, her mind racing. New earth. All things new, she murmured. What if it's not about gold at all? What if my father found something else at Devil's Backbone, something far more valuable than gold, as his letter said? Finn's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Like a new mineral, something unknown before. It would explain why Thornton's men found no gold when they worked the claim illegally, Bethany said, excitement building. They were looking for the wrong thing. And why your father would keep it secret, maintain the claim for years without working it. Finn stood, pacing the small cabin. A new mineral discovery could be worth a fortune to the right buyer, especially if it had valuable properties for industry. Bethany remembered her father's interest in scientific journals, the books on geology and mineralogy that had seemed so out of place on a shopkeeper's shelves. Had he been educating himself all those years, preparing for a time when he could safely exploit his discovery? We need to see the claim ourselves, she said decisively. Not just from a distance. We need to know exactly what Thornton's men are looking for and whether they've found it yet. Finn looked at her skeptically. That's too dangerous. The area is crawling with Thornton's men and you're still recovering from a gunshot wound. What choice do we have? If we wait until I'm fully healed, Thornton might have stripped the claim of whatever my father found. Bethany stood, wincing only slightly at the pull of her healing wound. Besides, I didn't come all this way to hide in a cabin while someone steals my birthright. Finn studied her face, seeming to weigh her determination against his concern for her safety. Finally, he nodded. All right. But we do this carefully. We wait for dark, approach from the north where the terrain provides more cover, and observe only. No confrontations. Agreed, Bethany said, relieved he wasn't going to fight her on this. When do we leave? After sundown. It's about 5 miles to the claim as the crow flies, but we'll need to take a more circuitous route to avoid being seen. He gestured to her side. Are you sure you're strong enough for this? Bethany straightened her shoulders, pushing aside the dull ache in her side. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Valens, and far more determined than you might imagine. The hint of a smile touched his lips. I'm beginning to understand that, Miss Vance. As they prepared for their nighttime expedition, checking weapons and gathering supplies, Bethany felt a curious mixture of fear and anticipation. Whatever her father had discovered at Devil's Backbone had cost him something precious, the chance to see his only daughter grow to womanhood. He'd chosen to abandon his find rather than endanger his family, maintaining the claim from a distance as a legacy for her future. Now, more than ever, she was determined to honor that sacrifice by reclaiming what was rightfully hers, and perhaps, in the process, understanding the man her father had truly been beneath his quiet shopkeeper's exterior. The moon was a silver crescent hanging in the western sky as they approached Devil's Backbone, having left their horses tethered in a secluded draw half a mile back. Moving on foot allowed them to travel silently, using the scattered pine trees and rocky outcroppings for cover. Finn led the way, his movements fluid and assured in the darkness, occasionally reaching back to steady Bethany as they navigated the uneven terrain. Despite her determination, the journey had taken a toll. The wound in her side throbbed with each step, and she knew without checking that some of her stitches had likely torn. But Bethany gritted her teeth against the pain, refusing to become a liability when they were so close to their goal. "There," Finn whispered, pointing to a flicker of light ahead. "That's their camp." They crept closer, finally settling behind a large boulder that provided both concealment and a clear view of the encampment below. Thornton's men had established a substantial operation. Tents for sleeping, a cooking fire, and equipment scattered around the site. Near the creek that ran through the center of the claim, they'd erected a crude sluice box typically used for separating gold from gravel. "They're still looking for gold," Bethany observed softly. Finn nodded. "Or pretending to. See the two men by that outcropping." He pointed to where a pair of workers were examining rocks beneath a lantern's glow. "That's not how you look for placer gold. They're examining the rock itself." Bethany squinted in the darkness, wishing she could get closer. "Can you tell what kind of rock they're working with?" "Not from here. But Devil's Backbone is mostly granite with some volcanic intrusions, according to the geological surveys. Not typical gold-bearing formations." Finn shifted slightly, trying for a better vantage point. Whatever they're looking for would be embedded in the rock itself, not washed down in the stream bed. They watched in silence as the workers continued their examination, occasionally breaking larger pieces with hammers and studying the fragments intently. After some time, one of the men carried several samples to a larger tent set somewhat apart from the others. "That must be where their foreman stays," Finn whispered, "probably reporting what they've found." Minutes later, a man emerged from the tent, not the worker who had entered, but a tall, distinguished figure Bethany recognized immediately from her glimpse in Hawthorne. "Thornton," she breathed, surprised. "He's here himself." Finn's expression hardened. "That's unusual. Mining barons don't typically camp at remote claims with their workers. Whatever your father found, Thornton wants to be present when it's rediscovered." They watched as Thornton examined the rock samples, holding them up to the lantern light with evident excitement. He gave orders to the assembled men, his voice not quite carrying to where Bethany and Finn hid, but his animated gestures suggesting urgency. "They've found something," Finn murmured, "or they're close." Bethany felt a surge of anger and determination. These men were trespassing on her property, stealing what her father had preserved for her at great personal cost. The injustice of it burned in her chest, momentarily overshadowing the pain of her wound. "I need to get closer," she whispered. "I need to hear what they're saying." Finn's hand closed firmly around her arm. Too dangerous. They've got at least 8 men down there, all armed. Then what do we do? Just watch while they take everything. We gather information, Finn replied steadily. Then we make a plan. Right now, we know they haven't fully extracted whatever they're looking for. They're still searching, still testing samples. That gives us time. Bethany knew he was right, but the frustration of being so close yet unable to act was maddening. As they continued their surveillance, movement at the edge of the camp caught her attention. A rider approaching, moving fast. Someone's coming, she alerted Finn. The newcomer dismounted in a cloud of dust, hurrying to where Thornton stood. Even from a distance, the urgency in the rider's manner was evident. Words were exchanged, Thornton's posture stiffening as he listened. Suddenly, he turned and snapped orders to his men, who immediately began to extinguish fires and pack equipment. Something spooked them, Finn observed, tension in his voice. They're breaking camp. Within minutes, the once busy site was a flurry of activity as men loaded tools and supplies onto pack animals and doused the remaining lanterns. Thornton himself helped secure several small sacks that Bethany suspected contained rock samples, tying them carefully to his saddle before mounting. They're leaving, she said, bewildered by the sudden change. But why? Before Finn could answer, a new sound reached them, the distant but unmistakable approach of multiple riders from the direction of Hawthorne. Someone's coming, Finn whispered, pulling Bethany lower behind their sheltering boulder. A lot of someone's. They watched as Thornton's group hastily departed, heading north away from the approaching riders. Soon the claim stood abandoned, fires smoldering and tents flapping in the night breeze, eerie in their sudden emptiness. The new arrivals appeared minutes later, at least a dozen men on horseback, led by a figure Bethany recognized as Thomas Holbrook from the boarding house. Behind him rode several men wearing badges, including one whose stern demeanor marked him as a figure of authority. Federal marshals, Finn breathed in astonishment, and Holbrook leading them straight to Thornton's illegal operation. Bethany's heart leaped with hope. They came to stop the claim jumping. Looks that way, but how did they know? Finn's expression was puzzled. And why federal marshals instead of the local sheriff? They watched as the lawmen dismounted and began examining the hastily abandoned camp, their lanterns illuminating discarded equipment and the scattered evidence of Thornton's operation. The lead marshal conferred with Holbrook, pointing toward the direction Thornton's men had fled. We should make ourselves known, Bethany suggested. They're here to help. Finn hesitated. Let's be certain of that first. Federal marshals don't typically concern themselves with mining disputes, unless there's more at stake than a simple claim jump. They continued to observe as the marshals conducted a thorough search of the site, paying particular attention to the rocky outcropping where Thornton's men had been examining samples. One marshal carefully collected and bagged several fragments, securing them in a leather pouch with evident care. Finally, Finn seemed satisfied. All right, let's approach them openly, no sudden movements. Keep your hands visible. They rose from their hiding place, Finn calling out to announce their presence before the lawmen could mistake them for threats. Hello, the camp, Thomas Holbrook, it's Finn Valens. Rifles were immediately trained in their direction, but Holbrook stepped forward, peering into the darkness. Valens, is that you? We've been looking all over creation for you and Miss Vance. As they descended into the camp, the tension eased, though the marshals remained watchful. Holbrook rushed forward to greet them, relief evident on his weathered face. Thank God you're both safe, he said. When Walsh and his men started tearing Hawthorne apart looking for you, we feared the worst. We've been hiding at one of Triple Creek's line cabins, Finn explained. What's happening here? How did you know about Thornton's operation? Holbrook gestured to the lead marshal, a stern-faced man with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. This is U.S. Marshal James Harrington. He can explain better than I. Marshal Harrington studied Bethany with keen interest. Miss Vance, I presume? Daughter of Jonathan Vance. Bethany nodded, suddenly wary despite the man's official status. Yes, this claim belonged to my father and now to me. These men were trespassing. They were doing considerably more than trespassing, madam, Harrington replied grimly. They were attempting to extract and steal a mineral that the federal government has designated as a strategic resource. Bethany and Finn exchanged bewildered glances. Strategic resource, Finn repeated. What exactly did Jonathan Vance find here? Marshal Harrington considered them carefully before answering. What I'm about to tell you is not widely known outside certain government and scientific circles. 10 years ago, your father discovered a previously unknown mineral in this formation, one with remarkable properties. What kind of properties? Bethany asked. Her father's cryptic words about finding something far more valuable than gold suddenly taking on new meaning. The mineral absorbs and retains heat from sunlight, then releases it slowly over many hours, Harrington explained. Scientists believe it could revolutionize everything from home heating to military applications. Your father recognized its potential immediately. Finn whistled low. No wonder Thornton wanted it so badly. Indeed, the marshal's expression hardened. Thornton learned of the discovery through a government geologist he bribed. When he couldn't persuade your father to sell, he tried to force him out. That's when Jonathan Vance contacted the Department of the Interior. Bethany struggled to reconcile this information with the quiet shopkeeper she'd known. My father worked with the government, in a manner of speaking. He agreed to keep the discovery secret and maintain the claim in his name until the government could determine the full potential of the mineral. In exchange, he received a guarantee that the claim would remain his and eventually yours, with a significant stake in any commercial applications developed. The pieces were falling into place. Her father hadn't abandoned his discovery out of fear. He'd partnered with the government to protect it, ensuring his daughter would eventually benefit while keeping her safe from men like Thornton. How did you know to come now? Finn asked, the practical question cutting through Bethany's emotional realization. We've been monitoring Thornton for years, Harrington replied. When we received word from Helena that someone was making inquiries about Jonathan Vance's claim, we dispatched agents to Hawthorne. Mr. Holbrook here sent a telegram to our office when he learned you were in danger. Bethany turned to the boarding house owner with gratitude. You knew about my father's arrangement with the government, Holbrook nodded. Your father stayed at our place when he first came to Hawthorne. We became friends. Before he left, he asked me to keep an eye on his claim and notify certain parties if anyone ever came asking about it, especially you, his daughter. His weathered face creased in a smile. Took 10 years, but I kept my promise. The revelation that her father had planned so carefully, had put such measures in place to protect both his discovery and his daughter, brought tears to Bethany's eyes. All this time, she thought she'd been pursuing a mystery her father had left deliberately obscure, when in fact, he'd arranged a network of allies to guide and protect her when the time came. What happens now? She asked Marshal Harrington. Thornton got away with samples of the mineral. We'll catch up to him, the marshal assured her with quiet confidence. He won't get far, and those samples won't do him much good without the scientific knowledge to understand what he's found. He turned to Bethany with unexpected formality. Miss Vance, the government would like to renew the arrangement we had with your father. The mineral, which scientists have tentatively named vansite in your father's honor, remains under your ownership, with federal protection to ensure its proper development. The magnitude of the situation was almost overwhelming. What had begun as a mysterious journey to claim an inheritance had revealed itself to be something far larger, a legacy that could change the future of energy and technology, preserved by her father for her benefit. "I'll need time to consider," Bethany said, not wanting to make such a momentous decision in haste. Marshal Harrington nodded respectfully. "Of course. In the meantime, we'll secure the claim and post guards to prevent further trespassing. Perhaps you'd be willing to accompany us back to Hawthorne. It should be safe now, and we have much to discuss." As preparations were made for the return journey, Bethany found herself standing with Finn at the edge of the camp, gazing at the stark beauty of Devil's Backbone silhouetted against the night sky. Her father had seen something valuable in this remote place, not just a mineral with remarkable properties, but a future for his daughter. "Are you all right?" Finn asked gently, noting her pensive expression. "I'm trying to absorb it all," she admitted. "My father was so much more than I ever knew. A prospector, a scientist of sorts, a partner to the government in a discovery that could change the world." She shook her head in wonder. "All while running a dry goods store and raising me alone." Finn's hand found hers in the darkness, a warm, steady pressure that anchored her amid the swirling emotions. "He must have been an extraordinary man." "He was," Bethany agreed softly. "But I think what matters most is that everything he did, even keeping secrets, was to protect me and provide for my future." They stood in companionable silence, hands still joined, as the marshals finished securing the site. Eventually, Harrington called that they were ready to depart, and Bethany reluctantly prepared to leave this place that had meant so much to her father. "What will you do?" Finn asked as they walked back toward the waiting horses. "About the government's offer." Bethany considered the question seriously. "I think I'll accept with conditions. My father trusted these men enough to partner with them, but I want to maintain control over how this mineral is used. I believe he would have wanted that." Finn smiled, a flash of white teeth in the darkness. "Seems fitting. A new discovery should benefit humanity, not just fill the coffers of men like Thornton." As they mounted their horses for the journey back to Hawthorne, Bethany realized something important had changed within her. The journey that had begun with a mysterious letter had transformed her from a shopkeeper's daughter seeking an inheritance into a woman with purpose and vision, someone worthy of the legacy her father had preserved at such cost. And somewhere along the way, she'd found something else unexpected, a partner whose strength and integrity matched her own growing confidence. As she rode beside Finn toward an uncertain but promising future, Bethany felt, for the first time since her father's death, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The return to Hawthorne brought a flurry of activity and attention Bethany had never experienced. Marshal Harrington established temporary headquarters in the town's small courthouse, posting guards at strategic locations and issuing warrants for the arrest of Maxwell Thornton and his associates. The news that federal marshals had taken an interest in local affairs spread quickly, though the exact nature of their business remained confidential. For Bethany, the days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings with government officials, scientific experts, and legal representatives who arrived by stage from Helena. The discovery her father had made, the heat-retaining mineral now officially designated vansite, was indeed as revolutionary as Marshal Harrington had suggested. Its potential applications ranged from practical household uses to advanced military technology, with properties that engineers and scientists were still working to fully understand. Through it all, Finn remained steadfastly at her side, offering support, practical advice, and occasionally much-needed levity when the pressure of such momentous decisions threatened to overwhelm her. Though he had responsibilities at the Triple Creek Ranch, Harrison Whitfield had generously granted him leave to assist Bethany in settling her affairs, recognizing the extraordinary circumstances. "Mr. Whitfield says to take all the time you need," Finn reported after returning from a brief visit to the ranch. "Seems he's quite taken with the idea that one of his ranch hands is helping secure a scientific discovery of national importance." Bethany smiled, grateful for the understanding. "I hope this won't jeopardize your position there." They were sitting in the private dining room of Hawthorne's hotel, where Bethany had taken rooms at the government's expense. The comfort was a welcome change after the rustic conditions of the line cabin, particularly as her wound continued to heal. "Quite the opposite," Finn replied, his blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "Whitfield's already hinting that when all this is settled, he'd like to discuss a partnership arrangement. Seems my stock has risen considerably in his estimation." "As well it should," Bethany said warmly. "Without your help, I'd likely be dead in the wilderness and Thornton would have what he wanted." Finn's expression grew serious. "Speaking of Thornton, there's news. Marshal Harrington received a telegram this morning they've apprehended him trying to cross into Idaho territory. Walsh and 2 others were with him, along with the samples they took from your claim." Relief washed over Bethany. "So it's truly over." "It appears so. Thornton will face federal charges for conspiracy, attempted theft of strategic resources, and likely attempted murder once they connect him to the men who shot you." Finn reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You're safe now, Bethany. Your father's legacy is secure." The warmth of his touch sent a now familiar flutter through her chest. Over the past weeks, their relationship had evolved from rescuer and rescued to partners in a shared adventure. But beneath that partnership, something deeper had taken root, an attachment Bethany had been hesitant to acknowledge, given the circumstances that had brought them together. "What happens now?" she asked quietly, not withdrawing her hand from his. Finn's gaze held her steadily. "That depends largely on you. The government has made its offer regarding the Vansite deposits. You'll need to make a decision soon." The proposal was indeed generous. In exchange for exclusive development rights to the mineral, the federal government would provide substantial compensation and ongoing royalties for any commercial applications. Bethany would retain ownership of the claim itself and a significant stake in all future developments, while a team of scientists and engineers would handle the extraction and research. "I've decided to accept their terms," she revealed, "with a few modifications. I want guarantees about how the mineral will be used, priority given to civilian applications before military ones, and I want oversight rights." Finn nodded approvingly. "Wise conditions. Your father would be proud." "There's something else," Bethany continued, her heart racing slightly. "I've been thinking about my future. The store in Chicago." She hesitated, gathering courage. "I'm considering selling it. There's nothing for me there now, and the Vansite development will require my attention here, at least initially." Finn's expression remained carefully neutral, though his hand tightened almost imperceptibly around hers. "You're thinking of staying in Montana?" "I'm considering it," she replied, watching his reaction closely. "Hawthorne is growing. It could use a proper bookshop, perhaps combined with a stationery and art supply store, something to bring a touch of culture to balance all the saloons and mining supply outfits." A slow smile spread across Finn's face, reaching his eyes in the way that had first drawn her to him. I think that's an excellent idea. Montana's rough edges could use some refining, and you strike me as just the woman to provide it. Bethany returned his smile, emboldened by his enthusiasm. There is one complication, however. What's that? I don't know the territory well. I'd need someone familiar with the people, the customs, the rhythms of life here. She took a deep breath. Someone who could help me navigate this new world while I establish myself. Understanding dawned in Finn's eyes, along with something warmer, more personal. I might know someone who fits that description, he said softly. Someone who's grown rather fond of showing you the ways of the West. Has he? Bethany asked, matching his tone. I was beginning to wonder if his interest might extend beyond mere frontier hospitality. Finn's thumb traced a gentle pattern across her knuckles. It extends considerably further, Miss Vance, though I've been hesitant to say so, given the circumstances that brought us together. The circumstances, she prompted. A gunshot wound, a ruthless mining baron, federal marshals, and a revolutionary mineral discovery, Finn enumerated wryly. Hardly the conventional setting for courtship. Bethany couldn't help laughing. I don't believe either of us is particularly conventional, Mr. Valens. Perhaps extraordinary circumstances are precisely what we needed to find each other. The look that passed between them held promises neither was ready to voice aloud. For now, it was enough to acknowledge the possibility of a future together, one built on the foundation of trust and mutual respect they'd established through danger and discovery. If you're staying in Montana, Finn said finally, I'd be honored to help you learn its ways. And perhaps, in time, we might discover what else we could mean to each other. Bethany felt as if her heart might overflow with unexpected joy. When she'd left Chicago with nothing but a mysterious letter and a crude map, she could never have imagined finding not only her father's legacy, but also a man whose courage and integrity matched her own growing strength. I'd like that very much, she replied simply. The weeks that followed brought rapid changes to Bethany's life. With the Van site claim secure and development plans underway, she returned briefly to Chicago to sell her father's store and settle her affairs there. The proceeds, combined with the initial payment from the government for the mineral rights, provided ample capital for her new venture in Hawthorne. Upon her return to Montana, she purchased a storefront on Main Street and set about transforming it into Vance Books and Stationery, a shop that would serve the growing community's need for literature, writing materials, and cultural enrichment. The town's response was enthusiastic, particularly from the wives of miners and ranchers who had long lamented the lack of civilized establishments in Hawthorne. Throughout the preparations, Finn was a constant presence, helping with renovations when his duties at Triple Creek allowed, offering advice on local preferences, and introducing Bethany to the community that was gradually accepting her as one of their own. Their friendship deepened, evolving naturally into a courtship that drew knowing smiles from Mrs. Holbrook and approving nods from Harrison Whitfield. By the time spring arrived, bringing wildflowers to the hillsides around Hawthorne and the first shipments of books to Bethany's newly opened store, their attachment was common knowledge throughout the territory. Finn had accepted Whitfield's offer of a partnership in a portion of Triple Creek Ranch, establishing himself as a man of property and standing in the community. The position allowed him more freedom to divide his time between ranch responsibilities and his increasingly serious relationship with the town's newest businesswoman. On a warm evening in early May, nearly a year after Bethany had first ridden into Hawthorne half dead from a bullet wound, Finn took her riding to a hilltop overlooking the town. The sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, casting a golden glow over the landscape that had become home to them both. "Hard to believe it's been almost a year," Bethany remarked as they spread a blanket on a flat rock and unpacked the picnic basket Mrs. Holbrook had prepared for them. "Sometimes it feels as though I've been here always," Finn smiled, handing her a glass of wine. "You've certainly made your mark on Hawthorne in a short time. The shop is thriving, the van site development is proceeding smoothly, and I believe Mrs. Sullivan mentioned yesterday that you've been nominated to head the Town Improvement Committee." Bethany laughed. "A polite way of saying they want me to badger the men into building proper sidewalks before the next rainy season turns Main Street into a mud pit again." "You have a talent for getting people to do things they should have done long ago," Finn observed with a twinkle in his eye. "Myself included." "Oh, and what have I inspired you to do, Mr. Valens?" Instead of answering directly, Finn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he admitted, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Though I'm beginning to think there's no such thing as a perfect moment, only the courage to create one." Bethany's heart began to race as he opened the box to reveal a ring with a modest diamond, flanked by two smaller sapphires that matched the color of his eyes. "Bethany Vance," Finn said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his expression. "When you rode into Hawthorne that day, I thought I was just helping a stranger in need. I never imagined you would change my life so completely." He took her hand, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "You've shown me what it means to fight for what matters, to claim your rightful place in the world without compromising your principles. I love your courage, your intelligence, your compassion. I love the way you've embraced this wild country and made it your own." He paused, holding her gaze. "Most of all, I love the woman you've become through all the challenges we've faced together, and I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life discovering who we can be together. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Bethany's vision as joy welled up within her. This man, who had first entered her life when she was too weak to speak, offering to talk enough for them both, had become the cornerstone of her new life in Montana. He'd protected her, supported her, respected her independence, and finally wonderfully loved her. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, Finn Valens, I'll marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and gathered her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, Bethany thought of her father. Jonathan Vance had hidden a precious discovery in these mountains, maintaining it faithfully until his daughter could claim her inheritance. But the true treasure he'd led her to wasn't the revolutionary mineral that bore their name. It was the chance to build a new life with a man whose heart matched her own in courage and constancy. Their wedding took place in late summer, a joyous affair that brought together the entire community of Hawthorne. The ceremony was held in the town's newly constructed church, with Mrs. Holbrook weeping happily in the front pew and Harrison Whitfield serving as Finn's best man. Marshall Harrington returned for the occasion, bringing news that the first commercial application of Vansite home heating tiles that stored solar energy during the day and released it throughout the cold night hours was nearing production. "Your father would be proud," the marshal told Bethany at the reception. "Not just of what you've accomplished with his discovery, but of the woman you've become. He always said you had the intelligence and strength to make your own way in the world." Bethany, resplendent in a gown of ivory silk ordered specially from San Francisco, smiled through happy tears. "I wish he could have been here. He would have liked Finn." "I believe he had a hand in bringing you together in his way," Harrington replied thoughtfully. "His letter brought you to Montana at precisely the moment when a certain cowboy would be in the right place to catch you when you fell." The thought was a comforting one that stayed with Bethany as she and Finn began their life together. They established their home in a comfortable house halfway between Hawthorne and the Triple Creek Ranch, allowing Finn to manage his partnership in the ranch, while Bethany continued to run her thriving bookshop in town. The arrangement suited them both, two independent spirits who had found in each other not limitations, but the freedom to pursue their individual passions while building a shared life. Their first child, a son they named Jonathan Thomas Valens, was born the following spring, bringing a new dimension of joy to their already full lives. As Bethany cradled their infant son, Finn beside her with wonder and pride shining in his eyes, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. "He has your eyes," Finn murmured, gently touching the downy head of their sleeping child. "But I think he has your father's determined chin." Bethany smiled, leaning into the strength of her husband's embrace. "A fitting combination. My father's persistence and your steady courage. He'll be a force to be reckoned with." "Like his mother," Finn added with a tender kiss to her temple. 2 years later, their family expanded again with the birth of twins, a boy and girl they named William Harrison and Elizabeth Rose. Their home echoed with children's laughter and the happy chaos of family life, while their respective enterprises continued to prosper. The development of Vansite brought a steady stream of royalties and recognition, allowing them to establish a foundation that funded scientific education for promising students, regardless of background or gender. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Finn surprised Bethany with a journey to Devil's Backbone, the place where her father's discovery had changed both their lives. The area had been transformed by careful development, with a small research facility established near the original claim site, and a protective boundary ensuring the unique mineral deposits would be responsibly managed for generations to come. Standing on the ridge overlooking the claim, with the summer breeze ruffling her hair and Finn's arm secure around her waist, Bethany felt the completion of a circle that had begun with her father's cryptic letter so many years before. "It's strange to think how differently things might have turned out," she mused, leaning into her husband's solid presence. "If I hadn't been wounded on the trail, if I hadn't ridden into Hawthorne when I did, if a certain cowboy hadn't been there to catch a beautiful woman falling from her horse," Finn added with a smile, turning her to face him. "Though I'm convinced we would have found each other somehow, Bethany. Some things are simply meant to be." Looking into the eyes of the man who had first cared for her when she was too weak to speak, offering to talk enough for them both until she found her strength, Bethany knew he was right. Their love had been forged in danger and uncertainty, tested by greed and violence, and ultimately triumphant through courage and trust. It was a love as enduring as the mountains around them, and as revolutionary as the mineral her father had discovered in their depths. "I love you, Finn Valens," she said simply, rising on tiptoe to kiss him beneath the vast Montana sky. "Thank you for catching me when I fell." His arms tightened around her, his voice a tender promise against her lips. "Always, my love, always." And in that moment, with the past honored and the future bright before them, Bethany knew that of all the valuable things her father's legacy had brought her, independence, security, purpose, the greatest treasure by far was the love of the steadfast cowboy who had helped her claim her rightful inheritance and, in doing so, had given her his heart.